The sun had barely risen over the Arizona desert, yet the heat was already pressing against the soldiers like a living thing. Dust hung in the air, shimmering in harsh rays that turned the training range into a scene from a war movie. Private Evan Mercer stepped off the transport truck, his boots crunching against the gravel, and adjusted the strap of his rucksack. His uniform was crisp, his hair short, but there was a tension in his shoulders that made him look older than his 21 years. The platoon's eyes followed him, some curious, most dismissive. "Fresh meat," someone muttered under their breath. Another soldier snickered, "Bet he won't last a week." Evan ignored them, moving silently toward the bunkhouse. He had learned early to keep his head down, to observe before being observed. His heart was steady, though it thumped in anticipation of what was coming. Training was only the beginning. Deployment, that would be the real test. The whispers followed him everywhere. Probably joined to pay off student loans. Look at those hands, shaky as a newborn deer. What's with that scar on his wrist? Evan touched the faint line peeking out from beneath his sleeve. It wasn't much, a shallow slice from a childhood accident, but it had left a mark, a reminder that pain could be endured and survived. He wasn't about to explain it to anyone. By noon, the platoon had gathered for their first live-fire drill. The instructors barked orders like machine guns, and soldiers moved in tight formations, boots thudding in rhythm on the hot concrete. Evan fell in line near the back, observing rather than acting. His body reacted differently than the others, like he was anticipating, reading each command before it was spoken. When the whistle blew and live rounds began to crackle downrange, Evan's reflexes caught every movement before most of the platoon even realized what was happening. A soldier tripped over a rock, and Evan was there to steady him before he hit the ground. Another round ricocheted near his section, and he ducked 3 seconds before the bullet would have reached them. No one could explain it. Not the sergeants, not the squad mates, not even the training officers who had seen everything the Army had to offer. Afterwards, Sergeant Cole, a mountain of a man with a voice like gravel, approached him. "You're moving like you've done this before," Cole said, jaw tight, eyes narrowing. "I'm just focused," Evan replied softly. His gaze was calm, but the words carried a weight that made the sergeant frown. Cole grunted. "Focus isn't enough to get you out of the field alive. Don't get cocky, rookie." Evan nodded, but inside he was thinking of something else entirely, something darker, something he didn't dare speak aloud. Later that night in the bunkhouse, Evan lay on his cot, listening to the snoring and muttering of the other soldiers. He traced patterns on the ceiling with his eyes, letting his mind drift to memories that didn't belong to him. He had always known he was different, though he didn't understand why. He could see danger before it happened, feel it creeping along the edges of a moment, like a shadow stretching in sunlight. It wasn't instinct, it wasn't training, it was warning. The other soldiers had started noticing. They tried to keep their distance, some out of respect, others out of fear. By the end of the first week, the teasing had stopped, but that didn't mean they trusted him. During drills, he anticipated every attack, moved faster than seemed possible, dodged faster than seemed human. Every time, a shadow of confusion crossed his instructors' faces. Some said he was lucky. Most didn't speak. They didn't know what to say. By the time the platoon was given their first night navigation exercise, Evan had become an enigma. The officers had instructed them to move silently through the desert, relying only on their training, their maps, and their compasses. Evan moved like a whisper. Every step was measured, every pause deliberate. He didn't make a sound. When the first simulated enemy ambush occurred, the others froze. Bullets simulated, of course, screamed past them. Soldiers ducked, some tripping, some shouting. Evan's body moved almost before the sound reached his ears. He pulled a struggling teammate behind cover, dove sideways to avoid imaginary fire, and delivered precise, calm commands that no one had taught him. Cole's eyes widened. "Where the hell did that come from?" he muttered. Evan didn't answer. He just moved, eyes scanning the horizon, listening to sounds no one else could hear. The desert's subtle whispers, the faint scrape of rocks, the shift of the wind. Every detail fed into something larger, something terrifyingly precise. Later, as the platoon gathered around the campfire, exhausted and covered in dust, some soldiers whispered about Evan. Not mockery this time, fear. "He's not human," one said quietly. "Probably has military parents or ex-special forces in his bloodline," another guessed. But even he didn't sound sure. Evan sat apart, staring into the flames. The fire reflected in his eyes, and for a moment it almost looked like he could see into the past and the future at the same time. His mind replayed a dozen sequences that hadn't happened yet, patterns he couldn't explain. That night, as the desert wind howled outside, Evan whispered into the dark, more to himself than anyone else. "I can't let it happen again." The words were heavy. They were a warning, a promise, and a confession all at once. What it was, no one around him could guess. And when the instructors reviewed the week's footage, the live-fire cameras had captured something subtle but chilling. Evan moving fractions of a second before anyone else, dodging imaginary threats, predicting the movements of enemies before they appeared on the screen. The analysts paused the footage over and over. Some muttered under their breath, some rubbed their eyes. One officer, a veteran of 2 deployments, leaned back in his chair and said simply, "This kid, he's not just lucky. Something else is happening here, something I can't explain." By dawn, the platoon was preparing for their first official deployment. Evan packed his bag in silence, his movements methodical. He didn't speak. He didn't joke. He didn't ask questions. He only prepared. Cole approached, a rare moment of curiosity breaking through his usual gruff demeanor. "You ready, rookie?" Evan didn't answer immediately. Then he nodded once. "As ready as I'll ever be." Cole squinted. "You know, I've seen a lot of soldiers, some good, some great. You're different." Evan's jaw tightened. "I just want to survive," he said, and in his mind he was calculating every possible scenario for what was coming next, every possibility, every outcome. Because in the desert, in the heat, in the chaos of war, he had learned one thing already. Survival was never luck. And something in him knew it wouldn't be. The sun had barely risen over the canyonlands near the Utah border, but the heat was already oppressive, rolling off the rocky cliffs in shimmering waves. The squad climbed into the Black Hawk helicopter, the engine screaming, shaking the cabin violently with every blast of rotor. Evan Mercer sat in the back, helmet on, eyes fixed on the desert below. Around him, the seasoned soldiers were joking nervously, trading light insults to hide the tension. But Evan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His senses were already scanning the landscape, reading shadows, predicting the wind, noting every ridge, every boulder, every potential ambush point. Sergeant Cole, a man whose presence seemed to fill the entire helicopter, glanced at him. "Rookie," he barked, "sit still. Don't get fancy, just stay alive. That's your job." Evan gave a small nod. Inside, he was already 2 steps ahead. The Black Hawk dropped them near a narrow canyon, sunlight bouncing off jagged rocks, creating shadows that danced across the desert floor. This was no ordinary operation. Intelligence had confirmed a hostile cell operating a hidden lab deep in the canyon, a place where unknown experiments were being conducted, where lives could be lost in minutes. The squad hit the ground running. Boots kicked up dust, rifles held tight, eyes scanning every crevice. Evan moved with them, but unlike the others, he wasn't just watching. He was sensing. Every crack of rock beneath his boots, every whisper of wind against the canyon walls, every distant echo, it all spoke to him. "Stay close," Cole barked, but even he noticed Evan's unusual calm. Where the others were tense, bracing for ambush, Evan moved as if he could already see the attacks before they happened. They had barely advanced 50 yards when Evan froze. "Stop," he whispered. Cole turned sharply. "What, Mercer, move it." "No," Evan said, his voice low and steady. Under that rock, a pressure mine. Cole's eyes narrowed. Pressure mine, you see that how far away? Evan pointed. It's there. The bomb tech, cautious and skeptical, approached. His hands hovered over the device, checking for trip wires, infrared signals, anything. And then he froze. Evan had been right. The mine lay hidden beneath the rock, exactly where he said. The squad stared at him, disbelief and fear mingling in equal measure. This wasn't luck. This wasn't training. This was something else entirely. The squad pressed forward, tension coiling tighter with each step. Narrow tunnels snaked through the canyon, dark as a coffin. Every echo, every sound seemed amplified. And then it happened, the first real ambush. Explosions ripped through the canyon behind them, sand and dust spraying in violent clouds. Bullets shredded the air, cutting through rocks, ricocheting in dangerous arcs. Soldiers dove for cover, shouting commands, firing blindly into the shadows. But Evan moved differently. He didn't fire blindly. He didn't panic, he predicted. He dragged Corporal Jenkins behind a boulder before a ricochet could strike, pulled Sergeant Morneau away from a falling rock, and repositioned Private Lopez with a precision that seemed impossible. Every move was smooth, instantaneous, perfectly timed. Cole watched him, jaw tight. How the hell is he doing that? He muttered. The helmet cameras captured every movement. Later, analysts would slow the footage down frame by frame, trying to understand how Evan seemed to move before the danger arrived. Evan's eyes scanned the canyon walls, pupils widening slightly. There were subtle hints in the shadows, movements almost too slight for anyone else to notice. But Evan noticed. He knew. Every shift of the enemy, every trap, every hidden sniper, it all seemed to announce itself to him, moments before anyone else could react. The squad continued deeper into the canyon. Every corner held danger, every rock could conceal death. And yet, Evan guided them through, moving like a ghost. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words were precise and commanding. Left flank, 3 o'clock. Sniper, avoid the open path, move through cover, he instructed. The squad obeyed without hesitation, instinctively trusting a rookie they had doubted only hours before. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, turning the canyon walls into blood-colored stone. Sweat soaked their uniforms and dust choked their throats, yet they pressed on. Then, near what appeared to be the end of the canyon, they found the lab. It was hidden behind a cluster of boulders, almost invisible from above. Its entrance was marked with faded symbols that made Evan's stomach tighten. He had seen these in his dreams, or whatever they were, visions that felt more like memories than imagination. Before anyone could react, Evan froze again. Cole noticed. What now? He snapped. Minefield, Evan said, pointing to the ground. Traps on both sides. They're waiting for us. Cole's face paled. How do you know? I saw it, Evan admitted, before it happened. The squad hesitated, then trusted him. They moved with him step by step, avoiding the mines hidden under thin layers of sand. The tension was unbearable. Every moment, a single misstep could trigger explosives. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the shadows. The enemy had spotted them. Bullets tore into the canyon walls, ricocheting dangerously close. Evan reacted instantly. He pulled Lopez down behind cover, rolled Jenkins to the side, and shouted precise commands to the squad, directing their fire. Yet he wasn't just reacting, he was predicting. His body moved ahead of the attacks, saving lives before the danger fully existed. The helmet cameras captured something extraordinary. Evan shifted, dodged, and repositioned before the enemy fired. Every shot, every explosion seemed to follow his choreography. Analysts would later stare at the footage, baffled. They would argue over it, replay it, pause it, and still fail to understand how a single soldier could anticipate every move in real time. When the last enemy fell, the canyon went silent. Dust settled like a thick fog, and the squad was left shaken, terrified, and in awe. Cole's voice broke through the quiet. "Mercer, what the hell are you?" Evan didn't answer. He only stared at the canyon floor, listening. Somewhere deep within him, a warning echoed, a sense of unfinished business. He knew this wasn't over. Because in his visions, no, his memories, this was only the beginning. He had seen this ambush before, and he knew the next one would be worse. As the squad regrouped and radioed command, Evan whispered to himself, almost imperceptibly, "They're not done, not by a long shot." The desert wind carried the words away. The squad didn't hear them. They couldn't, but the cameras did. And for anyone reviewing the footage later, the most disturbing thing was Evan's reflexes. It was the look in his eyes, a calm, almost detached understanding, a certainty that he knew exactly what would happen next. And he did. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the forward operating base, but inside the secure briefing room, the air was colder than ice. Analysts, officers, and intelligence operatives had gathered around a large screen, silent except for the hum of computers and the soft crackle of a speaker playing back the helmet footage from Operation Wraith Valley. The first frames showed the squad moving cautiously through the canyon. Dust kicked up from their boots, gunfire cracked, and explosions tore through the shadows. And there was Evan Mercer, calm, precise, moving with a grace that defied the chaos around him. The analysts paused, rewound, and slowed the footage again and again. Frame by frame, it became impossible to ignore. Evan didn't just react to danger, he anticipated it. Bullets whizzed past before his teammates even noticed them. Traps that should have been invisible to any human eye were avoided with surgical precision. Soldiers who would have been hit, killed, or injured were dragged out of the line of fire before the threats fully materialized. A veteran colonel leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "Play it again," he muttered. The footage played, and they noticed something new. Moments before each attack, Evan's pupils dilated slightly. His breathing shifted, not panic, not fear, but a controlled rhythm that seemed almost inhuman. His hands tensed, his body coiled, and he moved as if guided by some invisible force. The room fell silent. No one spoke. This isn't training," one analyst whispered. "This isn't luck. No human could move like that." A major nodded grimly. This is beyond anything we've documented in combat, beyond reflexes, beyond intuition. This is something else entirely." The colonel called for Evan. The door opened and he walked in, helmet still in hand, uniform dust-streaked but immaculate. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look proud. He looked calm, detached, almost as if he had already anticipated every question that would be asked. "Private Mercer," the colonel said, "explain this. How did you anticipate every attack during the operation?" Evan hesitated. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the screen, then back to the officers. I knew where they were going to be," he said quietly. The colonel's expression hardened. "Did someone tip you off? Are you hiding intelligence we don't know about?" Evan shook his head slowly. "No, I didn't know them. I've never seen them before, but I've been there." The room went silent. "Private Mercer," the colonel said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "this was your first deployment. How could you have been there before?" Evan swallowed hard. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Not for me, not exactly." The analysts exchanged uneasy glances. The air in the room grew thick with tension, the kind that precedes revelation or disaster. "What do you mean?" the major asked. Evan took a breath. "I've had visions, memories maybe, dreams that feel like memories. I see events before they happen. I see the outcomes, the deaths, the attacks, and I act to prevent them. I see things no one else can." One of the analysts leaned forward. "You're saying you foresaw the ambushes, that you—" "Yes," Evan interrupted. "I saw it before it happened. Every time I moved, I wasn't reacting. I was remembering or learning, I'm not sure which." The colonel pinched the bridge of his nose. "Private Mercer, these are serious claims. Are you suggesting precognition? that you can see the future. Evan looked down at his hands. I don't know, I just know what's coming. I see the danger, and I know how to survive it and how to save others. The room went silent again. For the first time, even the hardened officers didn't have words. Finally, a captain broke the tension. Then why didn't you report this? Why didn't you come forward? Evan's voice was barely audible. Because it's not just visions, they're warnings. And sometimes I see things I don't want to see. Things that aren't just possible, they're inevitable. If I don't act, people die. Every time. The colonel leaned forward, his eyes sharp. People you don't know, soldiers you've never met. Evan nodded. Yes, and sometimes the people I know, I can't control it. I can only try to act before it's too late. A younger analyst, shaking slightly, spoke up. Sir, the footage, it shows him moving before the threats even appear, before the gunfire, before the mines. How is that possible? I've never seen. I know, Evan said softly, almost to himself. I know. The colonel stared at him, weighing his words. Private Mercer, if what you're saying is true, we need answers, and we need them fast. You've seen something others haven't. You've survived things others haven't. Tell us, what are you seeing? Evan's eyes went distant. Images flashed behind his eyelids. The narrow canyon, the explosions, the shadows of soldiers falling, the lab hidden beneath the boulders. He saw the enemy before they appeared, every attack memorized, every outcome etched into his mind. I'm seeing what will happen, he said finally. And it's worse than we think. That lab, it's not what they said it is. The people inside, the experiments, it's not human. And the attacks, the ambushes, they're only the beginning. The analysts exchanged fearful glances. Private Mercer, the colonel said, voice steady but edged with tension. This is classified, top secret. Whatever you've seen, you understand the implications. Evan nodded slowly. I do, and I don't think we're ready, not yet. A lieutenant spoke up, trying to rationalize. Sir, it could be adrenaline, training, instinct. We've seen soldiers react fast, anticipate threats. Maybe he's just exceptional. Evan shook his head. No, you don't understand. I've seen this before. This isn't instinct. This isn't skill. I've lived it. Every death, every ambush, every choice, it's in my memory, though it's not my memory. I can't explain it, but I know what's coming next. The colonel leaned back, studying him. And what's coming next? Evan's lips pressed together. He glanced at the screen again, where his own movements in the canyon were frozen frame by frame. He could still feel the echoes of danger, the warnings pulsing in the images. The enemy, he said quietly, isn't done, not by a long shot, and what we've faced was only a test. There's something deeper, something ancient. I don't know what it is yet, but it's waiting for us. The room went utterly silent. No one breathed. The weight of his words hung in the air, thick as smoke. Then Evan said one final thing, almost to himself. And I've seen the cost if we fail. No one understood, not yet, but they would. Outside the briefing room, the desert wind rattled the windows. Somewhere beyond the base, the canyon waited, silent and patient. And Evan Mercer, the rookie no one wanted, carried knowledge that would change everything, knowledge no human should ever have. Because in his visions, in the footage, in the terrifying clarity of his mind, he had already seen the next battle. And he knew who wouldn't survive it. The night inside the base was restless. Lights hummed overhead in the secure briefing room, and shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. Private Evan Mercer sat alone in a corner, helmet in his lap, staring at the footage of the canyon on the screen. He replayed it over and over, not to admire his own skill, but because every frame gnawed at him with a memory that wasn't his. The colonel had left for the night, leaving Evan with a single order: explain everything or keep silent until it made sense. But how could he explain memories that weren't his? How could he describe visions of a battle he had already fought, but which had never happened, at least not in this lifetime? He closed his eyes. The images returned. The canyon, the ambush. his squad screaming as bullets tore through them, the lab beneath the rocks humming with machinery he couldn't name, and the enemy not fully human, not fully anything recognizable. Shadows with bodies that bent unnaturally, eyes that glowed with a strange intelligence, voices that hissed in a language no human tongue could articulate. And always the same moment. The moment when everyone around him, friends, comrades, even himself, would die, every time. He tried to shake it off, tried to convince himself it was imagination, a trick of adrenaline and survival instinct. But he couldn't. He remembered every death in detail. The sound of a rifle snapping a rib, the snap of a grenade tearing through the ground, the screams echoing off the canyon walls. And then came the worst part. He remembered the faces of the people he would lose, not just soldiers he had met this week. Others. Names, voices, eyes. He didn't know them in this life, but he knew them all the same. Evan's breathing quickened. His hands gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. "They're coming," he whispered to himself, voice trembling, "and I've seen this before." A knock at the door made him jump. It was Captain Reynolds, one of the few officers who had kept his composure through the briefing. He stepped inside, eyes wary. "Mercer," Reynolds said, voice low, "you've got to tell me, what exactly are you seeing? These aren't just instincts. These aren't dreams. We've got footage that no one can explain." Evan's gaze lifted, meeting the captain. "They aren't dreams," he said slowly. "They're memories, or something like memories. I've lived this before, Captain. Every ambush, every attack, every death, it's all there. I can't control it. I can't choose what I see, I can only act on it. And every time I fail, people die. Everyone I care about dies. Every single time." Reynolds' eyes widened. Wait a second. Are you saying you've what? Lived this battle before?" "Yes," Evan whispered, his voice cracking. "Not like this, not in this life, but in another. I don't know how to explain it. I just know what will happen and I can't stop seeing it." The captain's expression darkened. "You're telling me you've had premonitions about enemy attacks that aren't even happening yet, that you remember from another version of yourself?" Evan nodded, a shiver running through him. "And it's worse than that. In the visions, I've seen things I don't want to see. Terrible things, experiments on people, soldiers, civilians, children, even things that aren't human. I've seen the lab beneath the canyon, the cells, the shadows. They kill everyone if I don't intervene. And every time I intervene, I survive. But others, they don't. I've seen their deaths over and over." Reynolds took a step back. "Holy hell, that's insane." "I'm telling you the truth," Evan said, voice rising with frustration and fear. "I can't make you understand, I can only tell you what's coming next, and it's worse than anything you've imagined. Those shadows, they aren't just soldiers, they're something else, something ancient, and they're already waiting for the next cycle. They're patient, they watch, they learn, and they kill." The captain swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell anyone before the operation? Why didn't you report this?" Evan's face drained of color. He stared at the wall, voice barely audible. "Because if I had, they would have taken me, studied me, tried to use me, and it wouldn't have stopped it, not this time, not ever." Reynolds' mind raced. "So you're saying you're seeing warnings, and you're acting on them, but it's not just prediction, it's memory. You've done this before, you've failed before, and you're trying to survive and save others." "Yes," Evan said, nodding slowly. "But the thing is, every time I think I've stopped it, it changes. The visions shift slightly. The enemy adapts. I can't stop the cycle, Captain. I can only slow it, only buy time, and each time the cost is higher." Reynolds' hand shook slightly as he took notes. He was a career officer, someone who had seen real horror in war zones, but nothing like this. "And what about the soldiers you've been with?" he asked. "The ones on your team?" Evan's eyes darkened. "I've seen them die, every one of them, and every time I try to change it, every time I save some and lose others, and it's always worse the next cycle. And if I fail completely, then they all die, including me." The room was silent for a long moment. Only the faint hum of the computers filled the air. Reynolds finally asked the question that had been nagging at him. Then, what are you going to do? Evan's gaze was distant. I don't know if there's a way to end it, but I've learned one thing: if I do nothing, everyone dies. And I can't do nothing, not this time, not again. The captain swallowed hard. Evan, this changes everything. We need to know more. We need to plan around it, but how do we even prepare for someone or something that shouldn't exist? Evan's lips pressed into a thin line. You don't, he whispered. You survive it, and you trust me. That's all you can do, because I've seen the battlefield cameras. I've seen the enemy, and I know the next wave is coming, and it's going to be worse. Reynolds glanced at the screen again. He saw the footage, the calm, precise movements, the way Evan had saved lives before the danger even existed. But now he also saw the cost behind those movements, the fatigue, the tension, the terror hidden behind Evan's controlled expression. Sir, Reynolds said finally, voice low, do you think he's human? The colonel, returning quietly to the room, stood over the footage. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried a weight that made the entire room tense. I don't know, he admitted. But whatever he is, he's going to change everything about how we fight. And if we don't figure out the rest of the story, if we don't understand what he's seen, we're all going to die in that canyon. Or worse. Evan's jaw tightened. He stared at the screen once more. He could see the canyon, the shadows, the lab, and deep in his chest a dread took hold. He knew what was coming next. He had lived it before. And this time it wouldn't just be a drill. The base was in chaos. Alarms shrieked, red lights pulsed, and the metallic taste of fear hung thick in the air. The attack had come suddenly, without warning, a wave of violence that left the soldiers scrambling. Evan Mercer sprinted through the corridors, his boots pounding against the steel floors, instincts guiding him faster than thought. He didn't hesitate, he knew where to go. Evan, Cole shouted behind him, but Evan didn't answer. He never did. He never needed to. The armory was the key. He had seen it before, in dreams, in visions, in memories that weren't his, and he knew that if he reached it first, lives could be saved. The corridor twisted sharply, and a masked figure appeared, gun raised, aiming at the unsuspecting armory officer. Time seemed to slow. Every soldier in the hall froze, caught between panic and disbelief. Evan didn't hesitate. In one fluid motion, he tackled the attacker aside, sending the rifle clattering across the floor. Sparks flew as it struck the metal lockers. The officer ducked behind the counter, wide-eyed, trembling. Cole and the rest of the squad finally arrived, panting and wide-eyed. Mercer, how the hell did you know he'd be here? Cole shouted. Evan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes were fixed on the attacker now sprawled on the ground. The man's mask had been knocked loose. What stared back at Evan made his stomach turn. Pale, almost translucent skin stretched tight across unnaturally elongated cheekbones. Veins rose like dark rivers beneath the surface. The pupils were wrong, too large, too black, too alien. Evan's heart pounded. He had seen this in his visions. The same pale figure had lunged at him countless times before, in endless permutations of death. And yet here it was. The attacker hissed, an inhuman, guttural sound that seemed to scrape the walls as it echoed. Its fingers flexed like claws, and in a terrifying spasm, it convulsed violently and collapsed. Its body began to discolor, gray spreading like ink across skin, as if it were dying from the inside out. The soldiers stepped back, mouths agape. Cole gripped Evan by the vest. What the hell are these things? Evan swallowed hard. They're not human, he whispered. His eyes darted to the body, then to the surrounding hallway. And they're only the beginning. A lieutenant who had been covering the perimeter yelled over the alarms. Sir, we found something else. Something in the canyon lab. You need to see this. Evan's stomach tightened. He knew what was coming. He had seen it. Cole asked, incredulous, What do you mean, seen it? Mercer, what are you saying? Evan didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer to the collapsed attacker, eyes scanning its twisted form. The body was wrong, completely wrong, and it sent a chill down his spine. He had seen countless iterations of this in his visions. Every time someone died, every time the outcome was brutal. And now, standing before him, it had become terrifyingly real. He finally turned to Cole, his voice low and urgent. This was in my visions. The creatures, they're connected to the lab beneath the canyon, experiments, testing, mutations. They're being created, trained, or worse. Cole shook his head, confusion and disbelief battling fear. You expect me to believe that this thing, that it's part of some lab experiment? Are you insane? No, Evan said sharply. I'm telling you what I know. I've lived this. I've seen the lab, the experiments, the victims. And every time they come for the next cycle, every time someone dies. And if I don't act, this is just the first of many. A hush fell over the room as soldiers processed his words. Their minds raced, trying to reconcile the inhuman attackers with the calm, precise movements of the rookie who had saved them all. Then one of the soldiers approached, pointing to the attacker's jacket. Sir, look at this patch. Evan's eyes followed the gesture. His breath caught. On the tattered jacket was a symbol, a black circle with a distorted eye in the center. He recognized it immediately, from his visions, from the nightmares that had haunted him for months. They're already here, he whispered. Cole's face paled. Who's here, Mercer? Who are we even fighting? Evan shook his head slowly. Not soldiers, not humans, something else, something ancient. And they've been using the lab to replicate, experiment, create more. The alarms intensified. Red lights flashed, illuminating the horror around them. Evan's team realized that the attack wasn't random. It had been targeted, precise, and it was escalating. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. We need to move, he said. The lab, the chamber beneath it, that's where we'll find answers or more danger. We have no choice. Cole's jaw tightened. Rookie, you're leading us into a nest of whatever these things are. You know that. Evan's expression hardened. I've seen it before. I know what's waiting. I can't tell you everything, but if we don't go, no one survives. The squad hesitated, uncertainty battling survival instinct. But Evan didn't give them a chance to debate. He sprinted toward the exit, guiding them toward the canyon and the hidden path that led to the lab. The bodies of the fallen attackers littered the hall, grotesque reminders of what they were up against. Soldiers exchanged glances. Fear mingled with a grudging respect for the rookie whose visions had saved them. As they reached the canyon floor, Evan paused. The desert wind whipped against his face, carrying the scent of dust and blood. He turned to the squad. This isn't just an ambush, he said quietly, eyes scanning the horizon. It's a test, and the real fight is still waiting for us in the lab. Cole's voice was tight. You sure about that, Mercer? Evan nodded, a grim determination in his gaze. I've seen it, and this time we don't have a choice. We go in or we die. The squad followed, weapons ready, hearts pounding, every step weighted with fear and anticipation. The canyon walls loomed overhead, shadows stretching long as if warning them away. And somewhere beneath the rocks, the lab awaited, a place Evan had glimpsed countless times before, in dreams, in visions, in memories that weren't his. He could feel it, the hum of machinery, the cold calculation of something intelligent and cruel, the presence of the enemy waiting in the darkness. And as they approached the entrance, Evan whispered, almost to himself, a warning he couldn't silence. They're waiting, and this is only the beginning. Entrance to the canyon lab was smaller than anyone had expected, a jagged opening concealed by boulders and shadows. Inside, the air was cold and metallic, carrying the faint hum of machinery and the acrid scent of chemicals. Evan Mercer paused at the threshold, senses straining. Every fiber of his body screamed that danger was near, and not just the danger of a fight, but of something far older, far more patient, and far more intelligent than anything he had faced before. The squad followed him cautiously, weapons raised, flashlights cutting thin beams through the darkness. Cole moved beside Evan, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, sweat running down his brow despite the chill. "Stay tight," Evan whispered. "They're watching. Every movement is being measured." "What do you mean, measured?" one of the soldiers asked, voice tight with fear. Evan shook his head. "I can't explain, just move with me." They advanced slowly, the corridors twisting like the inside of a nightmare. The walls were lined with pipes and wires, humming softly, vibrating underfoot. Strange symbols were etched into the metal panels, shapes that seemed familiar yet impossible to comprehend. They weren't language, not really, but a pattern, a warning. Evan recognized them immediately. "Here," he said, stopping suddenly. "The first chamber, something is inside." Cole tightened his grip on his rifle. "Mercer, are you sure? We've already seen what's waiting for us outside." "I've seen this," Evan said quietly. "We have no choice." He pushed the steel door open, and the squad entered a large chamber bathed in sickly fluorescent light. Rows of cells lined the walls, their glass opaque, shadows moving behind them. In the center, a series of tables held equipment that defied immediate comprehension. Syringes filled with dark fluids, mechanical devices that resembled limbs, and small cages holding creatures that twitched and hissed inhumanly. Evan's stomach turned. He had seen this before. The lab in his visions had looked identical, and now, standing here, it was real. "They're experimenting," he whispered. "On everything, soldiers, civilians, animals trying to create something new." A sudden noise made everyone freeze. A high-pitched, chittering sound, almost like teeth scraping metal. One of the cages quivered violently, and a shadow burst from it, a creature unlike anything the squad had seen outside. Its body was elongated, joints bending at impossible angles. Its eyes glowed a pale green, and it moved with unnerving intelligence. Evan reacted instinctively. He grabbed Private Lopez and yanked him behind a table just as the creature lunged. Its claws shredded the metal surface, sparks flying. "Move," Evan shouted, voice sharp and commanding. "Every shadow is a threat." Bullets rang out, but the creature seemed to anticipate them. It twisted midair, dodging rounds with preternatural speed. Another creature emerged from the shadows, and then another. The lab erupted into chaos. Evan's mind snapped into focus. Every detail he had seen in his visions guided him. The trajectory of attacks, the timing of jumps, the placement of his squad. He moved like a phantom, dragging soldiers out of danger before the enemy could strike, directing fire with pinpoint precision. Cole yelled, "How the hell are you moving like that?" "I've been here before," Evan shouted, dodging another swipe from a clawed hand. "I know what's coming." The squad was barely keeping up, adrenaline surging, but Evan's predictions saved them repeatedly. Each lunge he dodged, each trap he anticipated, each shadow he neutralized confirmed what the helmet cameras outside had already shown. This was beyond human capability. Then they reached the central chamber, where the largest cage stood. Inside was a creature unlike the others, towering, muscular, and clearly the apex of the experiments. Its skin shimmered with unnatural patterns, and it emitted a low growl that reverberated through the walls. Evan froze. He had seen this in his visions, the moment when everything went wrong, the moment when soldiers died, the moment when the enemy revealed its true nature. "It's the Alpha," Evan whispered, voice trembling. "It's controlling them, and it knows we're here." The creature's eyes snapped toward them. A wave of cold fear swept through the squad, as if the lab itself had recognized them. The Alpha lunged with terrifying speed, and Evan reacted instantly, pulling Cole out of the path of its strike. "Form a circle," Evan shouted. "Keep it contained, do not let it escape." The squad fired, but the Alpha was relentless. It crashed through tables, tore open cages, and rallied the smaller creatures. Chaos consumed the lab, machines sparking, alarms blaring, metal screeching against metal. Evan's vision narrowed. He could see patterns, every strike, every lunge, every angle. His body moved before his mind processed the attack. He spun, kicked, and pulled, saving soldiers even as the lab descended into horror. One of the smaller creatures lunged at Evan from behind. Time slowed in his mind. He saw the attack before it happened, felt it before it landed. He rolled, grabbed a metal rod, and struck the creature, sending it crashing into a cage. Sparks flew. The alpha roared, a sound so loud it shook the walls. Evan froze for a moment, the memory of countless past cycles flooding back. He had faced this creature before, countless times, and every iteration ended in blood. Every iteration ended in failure. He clenched his fists. "Not this time," he muttered. He began to move through the lab with lethal precision, dragging soldiers, firing and neutralizing threats before they materialized. Each step was calculated, every move a memory replayed. But this time, Evan noticed something new. The alpha hesitated. It had never hesitated before. Evan's pulse quickened. Something had changed. He realized that the cycles he had been trapped in, visions, memories, warnings, had prepared him for this moment. And for the first time, he believed they could survive. The lab shook violently as the alpha crashed into a support beam, the structure groaning. Evan pulled the squad toward the exit, moving faster than thought itself. "Almost there," he shouted, "just a little further." The squad emerged from the lab into the desert night, coughing and covered in blood, dust, and sweat. Behind them, the lab trembled, and they could hear the roar of the alpha and the smaller creatures echoing from within. Evan sank to the ground, gasping, staring at the horizon. He had survived. His squad had survived. But the cost was clear. The lab, the creatures, and the experiments inside were only the beginning. Cole knelt beside him, shaking his head. You're something else, Mercer. I've seen war, I've seen death, and I've seen miracles, but this..." Evan looked up at the stars, wind whipping through his hair. "It's not a miracle," he said softly. "It's a warning, and they're coming back stronger, smarter, and next time we may not survive." The desert wind carried the sound of distant screams from the canyon. Somewhere deep inside, the alpha and its minions were regrouping, learning, waiting. Evan closed his eyes. He could see it all, the battles to come, the lives to be lost, the terror waiting for them. And he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would face it again and again, and he would fight no matter the cost. Because he had seen the future. And it wasn't ready for him. The desert night was quiet, deceptively calm, as the squad regrouped behind the jagged rocks overlooking the lab. Their faces were smeared with blood, sweat, and dust. Their breathing was heavy, ragged, but their eyes held a mixture of awe and fear. Evan Mercer sat cross-legged on the ground, staring into the darkness, every muscle tense, every nerve alert. He had survived the impossible, guided by the visions that no one else could comprehend, but the danger wasn't over. Cole knelt beside him, rifle at the ready. "Mercer, you're something else. I don't know how you do it, but you're keeping us alive. But those things, the alpha, that lab, it's not over, not even close." Evan didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, scanning for something only he could perceive. "I know, they're regrouping. The alpha is smart. It's learning. Every move we make, it records, it adapts. And next time it will hit harder." A voice came through the radio, a crackling signal from command. "Cole, report status. What's your position?" Cole pressed the device to his ear. We're outside the lab, command. Situation contained, but the enemy, it's unlike anything we've encountered." A pause, then a cold, calm voice. "Understood. Hold position until extraction." Cole lowered the radio, eyes narrowing. "They don't know what's down there. No one does." Evan's voice cut in sharply. "And they never will, not unless we take it with us. The lab, the alpha, it has to be neutralized or they'll unleash more. This isn't just an ambush, it's a program, a cycle, and it's expanding." Suddenly, a movement flickered in the shadows behind them. Evan's senses flared. He turned instinctively, rifle raised. "Who's there?" he demanded. From the darkness, a figure emerged. A familiar uniform, a familiar face. It was Lieutenant Daniels, the officer who had accompanied them earlier in the mission. But something was wrong. His eyes were cold, expression unreadable, and he moved with a confidence that sent a chill down Evan's spine. "Lieutenant, what are you doing here?" Cole asked, tense. Daniel's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "Observing," he said, "and assisting." Evan's instincts screamed. This was not the lieutenant he knew. The hairline fracture of the mind, the subtle shift in movement, something in Daniels had changed. Something unnatural. "You've been compromised," Evan said softly, his eyes narrowing. "The lab, the Alpha, it's reached you." Daniels chuckled, low and almost metallic. "Compromised? No, Mercer. Enlightened. I've seen the possibilities, I've seen the patterns, and now I can help them succeed." Cole stepped forward, rifle aimed, disbelief and fury warring in his voice. "Daniels, what the hell are you talking about? You're one of us." "I was," Daniels said calmly. "But now I see the truth. The Alpha, the lab, the program, it's bigger than all of you, bigger than this base, and you're in my way." The air became tense, heavy with imminent violence. Soldiers moved instinctively, raising rifles, flashlights swinging across the desert rocks. But Evan's focus was sharp. He had seen this before, not the attack itself, but the moment when someone close would betray them, when the cycle would twist in ways that seemed impossible. "Mercer," Cole hissed, voice tight. "Do something, he's one of us, I don't." Before Cole could finish, Daniels lunged, moving with precision and speed that mirrored Evan's own. Reflexively, Evan rolled aside, firing a shot that slammed into the sand behind Daniels, sending him stumbling. Evan's mind raced. He had predicted every enemy attack before, but this was different. This was human intelligence mixed with something else, something learned, something trained. Daniels wasn't just a traitor. He had been prepared. He had been taught. The squad opened fire, but Evan moved faster, intercepting attacks, guiding soldiers, dragging Cole behind cover before a perfectly aimed shot struck. He realized, even as the chaos unfolded, that Daniels had been turned by the program, or the Alpha itself. His betrayal wasn't random, it was orchestrated. Evan's heart pounded. He had seen countless cycles of the lab, countless deaths, but he had never predicted a betrayal from within their own ranks. This was new, dangerous, and the timing perfect. Daniels recovered, his movements almost inhuman. He pressed forward, a pistol drawn, firing with deadly accuracy. One of the soldiers screamed as a bullet ripped through his shoulder. Evan reacted instantly, shoving him behind a boulder, firing a shot that forced Daniels to duck. "This is exactly what I saw," Evan muttered under his breath. "The betrayal, the deaths, the chaos." Cole yelled, "Mercer, do something." Evan took a deep breath, centering himself. He could feel the rhythm of the battle, the flow of movement, the possibilities branching into countless outcomes. He could not stop Daniels entirely, but he could contain him, guide his squad, minimize the damage. He moved like a shadow, darting between rocks, directing soldiers, neutralizing threats before they materialized. Every shot, every lunge, every movement he had memorized in visions came to life. Daniel snarled, frustration evident. You're always one step ahead," he shouted. "How do you do it?" Evan's voice was calm, almost detached. "I've seen this before, every cycle, every attack, every death, and I refuse to lose again." The desert echoed with gunfire, the screams of the wounded, and the growls of creatures from the lab that had begun to emerge, drawn by the noise. Evan realized the betrayal was only the beginning. Daniels wasn't just working alone. He had activated signals, drawn the Alpha's minions closer, and now the battlefield was expanding exponentially. "Everyone move," Evan shouted, Back to the ridge, hold position, do not let them flank us. The soldiers scrambled, following his orders with a mix of fear and trust. Evan's ability to predict attacks saved them repeatedly as creatures leaped from shadows, bullets whizzing past before they even realized the threat. Daniels, realizing he was losing control, roared and charged, pulling one of the squad members into a struggle. Evan reacted with a split-second calculation, dragging Cole into a protective stance, firing and incapacitating Daniels without killing him. The betrayal had been contained, but the cost was high. Breathing hard, Evan stepped back, scanning the horizon. The Alpha's minions were advancing from the lab, alerted by the chaos. He knew that this was only the prelude. The real fight, the nightmare he had foreseen, was about to begin. He looked at the squad, their faces pale, exhausted but alive. He swallowed hard, a grim determination settling over him. "This isn't over," he said quietly, voice cutting through the night. "The Alpha, Daniels, the lab, they're all connected. And next time we won't survive unless we're ready, unless we fight smarter, unless we understand the full cycle." Cole nodded, eyes wide. "We follow you, Mercer, all the way, but what the hell are we even fighting?" Evan stared into the darkness, feeling the weight of countless cycles, countless visions, countless deaths. "Something older than war," he whispered. "Something patient, intelligent, and unstoppable, and I've seen what happens if we fail." The desert wind blew cold and heavy. Somewhere in the distance, a low growl rumbled from the canyon lab, a promise that the nightmare was far from over. Evan's eyes glinted with resolve. He had survived the impossible. He had guided the squad through the unthinkable. And now he had to prepare for the next cycle, one that would test every limit of his body, his mind, and the fragile humanity around him. Because failure was no longer an option. The canyon stretched before them, dark and silent except for the distant hum of the lab deep beneath the rocks. Evan Mercer's squad huddled behind jagged boulders, weapons ready, every nerve on edge. The betrayal from Lieutenant Daniels had shaken them to their core, but they had survived. And now, at last, the final confrontation was coming. The moment Evan had seen countless times in his visions. The moment where survival or annihilation would be decided. Evan's eyes scanned the canyon, his mind racing through sequences of events he had already experienced, outcomes he had already memorized. Every shadow, every crevice, every potential ambush was logged in his mind. The Alpha was out there, waiting. And he knew that this time it would not be restrained by the lab. It had learned. It had adapted. "Stay sharp," he whispered to the squad. "This isn't just a fight, it's a hunt, and we are the prey until we turn the tables." Cole looked at him, pale but resolute. "Mercer, how do we even fight something like that? Something not human." Evan's jaw tightened. "We fight smarter, faster, together, and we use what it taught us." They moved cautiously, creeping along the canyon floor, weapons raised, flashlights cutting narrow beams across jagged rocks and shifting sand. The air vibrated with tension, each gust carrying the faintest echo of growls, the whisper of movements that weren't human. Suddenly, the canyon erupted in chaos. From the shadows emerged dozens of the inhuman attackers, each more grotesque than the last. Limbs bent at impossible angles, claws snapping, eyes glowing with intelligence and malice. Their numbers were overwhelming. Evan's mind raced. He had seen this in his visions. He had moved through these attacks countless times, but never like this. This was larger, faster, more intelligent. "Form a defensive line," Evan shouted. "Do not let them encircle us." The squad obeyed, firing with precision, but the creatures adapted instantly. Bullets tore through the sand, only to glance off armored limbs or strike shadows that shifted before impact. One leapt onto a boulder and pounced toward Cole, claws extended. Evan reacted in a heartbeat, pulling him out of the path and firing at the creature's vulnerable side. "This is exactly like I saw," he muttered under his breath. "Every death, every strike, I know what comes next." The Alpha emerged from the darkness, taller, more imposing than any of the others. Its glowing eyes scanned the squad, assessing, calculating. It let out a guttural roar that shook the canyon walls and charged. "Focus fire on the Alpha," Evan shouted. "We take it down first." The squad opened fire, bullets tearing into the creature, but the Alpha barely slowed. It dodged, twisted, and counterattacked with terrifying speed. One swipe of its claw sent a soldier flying into a boulder, unconscious. Evan's heart pounded. He had seen this outcome too. He knew what would happen if the Alpha reached them. Time slowed in his mind. He calculated trajectories, predicted the Alpha's next move, guided his squad with near-telepathic precision. Left flank, Cole, push up. Lopez, cover the rear. The soldiers moved as if synchronized by some invisible force. Bullets struck, creatures fell, but new attackers replaced them almost instantly. The Alpha roared again, leaping toward Evan himself. He rolled aside, dodging the swipe, and fired a shot that hit its shoulder, forcing it to stumble. But it was relentless. It recovered instantly, charging again with intelligence that bordered on human cunning. Evan realized for the first time that this wasn't just instinct. The Alpha was learning, adapting, almost thinking. He had seen this too, had seen the countless deaths, the moments where he failed. But this time he refused to lose. Evan focused, slowing his breathing, centering himself in the rhythm of the battle. He remembered every cycle, every move, every strike. He anticipated attacks before they happened, predicted the creatures, responses, and guided his squad with perfect timing. Then with a sudden clarity he saw it, the weak point. The Alpha's core, the nexus of its strength. He had glimpsed it in the visions, and now it was real. "Everyone target the core now," he shouted. Bullets, explosives, and fire tore into the Alpha. It shrieked in pain, thrashing violently, knocking soldiers aside. Evan dove toward it, rifle raised, firing precise shots to keep it off balance. The Alpha turned toward him, claws raised, jaws snapping. But Evan moved faster, dodging, anticipating, predicting. With one final leap, he landed atop a boulder, firing directly at the Alpha's exposed core. The creatures around it faltered, hesitating for the first time. The Alpha screamed, a sound that seemed to tear reality itself, and then collapsed, its body convulsing violently before lying still. Silence fell over the canyon. The remaining creatures scattered, retreating into the shadows, leaving the squad shaken but alive. Cole collapsed to his knees, gasping, "Mercer, you did it, how?" Evan's chest heaved, sweat and blood streaked his face. "I've seen it before," he whispered. "Every move, every strike, every moment, and this time we survived." The soldiers stared at him in awe, fear, and disbelief. He was a rookie, a boy they had underestimated. But now he was something else, a soldier who had faced the impossible and lived to tell the tale, guided by visions that no human could understand. As the squad regrouped, Evan looked toward the lab in the distance. Its machinery was smoking, lights flickering. The Alpha was gone, but the program, the cycles, the lab, it wasn't finished. "Command," Cole said, picking up the radio. "We've neutralized the Alpha, but the lab, the threat, it's bigger than we thought." There was a pause. Then the familiar, cold voice of command replied, "Understood. Extraction will arrive. Hold position and secure the site." Evan nodded slowly. "Command, we need to study this, understand it. They're not finished, not ever, and if we do," he swallowed hard, "more will die." Cole placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rookie, I don't know how to explain this. I don't even know what to think, but you saved us, all of us." Evan's eyes were distant, scanning the horizon. He could still see visions, glimpses of future cycles, of attacks yet to come, of horrors waiting in the shadows. And deep down, he knew the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. He clenched his fists. They think they've lost, but they've only been delayed. The Alpha is gone, but the program continues, and the next time it will be worse. The desert wind swept through the canyon, carrying the echo of distant roars and the metallic tang of fear. The squad stood silent, the weight of what they had faced settling over them. They had survived the impossible, but the nightmare was far from over. Evan Mercer, the rookie no one believed in, had faced something beyond human comprehension and emerged victorious. But victory came at a cost, one he had already seen in visions, in memories, in cycles of death and survival. And he knew, deep in his soul, that the real battle was only beginning. He turned to his squad. "We've survived this cycle," he said, voice steady. "But the next will test everything. We need to be ready, all of us, and we will fight together, no matter what." The squad nodded, faces grim, hearts heavy, but trust in Evan unshakable. Somewhere in the canyon, deep beneath the rocks, the remnants of the lab stirred. Machines whirred, faint lights flickered, and shadows moved in anticipation of the next wave. The Alpha may have fallen, but the program, the nightmare that had created it, was still alive. And it was patient. Evan stood at the edge of the canyon, staring into the darkness. He had faced the impossible, guided by knowledge no one else possessed. He had saved lives, confronted betrayal, and survived horrors beyond comprehension. But he knew the truth: survival was only temporary. And the cycle would continue. End of Part 8. Evan defeats the Alpha and saves the squad, but the true threat of the lab and its inhuman creations persists. The story closes on suspense, leaving the lingering dread of the program's next cycle and the inevitability of future battles.